Okay, call meeting to order. Roll call.
All right, very good. Chair Works.
Here.
Vice Chair Yant. Here. Tony Bevel.
Here.
Dorian Leibel.
Here.
Lisa Patterson is absent. Lori Zwingli. Here. And Diane Foster is absent tonight. Thank you.
Okay, so first on the list is to approve the minutes. Does anybody have any corrections, comments? Minutes? So just have a motion and a second to approve those.
I move to approve the minutes.
Second. Second.
Okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So on to business. The first one is term expiration. So Tiffany, is there anything you're saying, or we just? Go with it?
Yeah, we did hear from both of
Speech
them.
prepared.
We did hear from both of them and they both indicated they'd like to continue, so. If there's anything else that we need to do, I believe, still has to go through approval and all that, but a recommendation. I think we're good.
We don't have to vote on that or anything. Yeah.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just thank you.
Yes, thank you for doing it again.
Please invite everyone. PAB.
Yeah, so the term is expiring. Oh, that's just 1 year.
Mhm.
No.
Yeah, and a year has gone by very, very quickly.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
it has.
has. Yeah. I don't, have you heard from Diane?
Well, at the police advisory board meeting, she mentioned that, since you weren't there, we didn't, make any decisions or anything. She just said that if, nobody else was interested, that she would be okay with continuing for another year. So, and that was kind of the end of that discussion, so they didn't proceed further.
Okay.
But we can always talk about it at next month. It's with your terms through June, so.
Okay.
Okay. So I guess is it every June somebody's time is up?
For the most part, the terms are 3 years and they were staggered, so, actually, I did print out the sheet for these terms here, but if you were just kind of curious, like who's this coming up, or?
Well, I was just curious to look ahead if people are not planning to continue on, if like trying to get interest in it
Yes, absolutely.
ahead of time.
Just 3 years, I got some time.
Yeah.
I'm still a new here.
Yeah, so you would have, your term would end when whoever's position you took over's term was gonna end, is kind of how it works, so.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And unfortunately, I'm not finding that sheet,
That's
sorry.
Okay, I just want to move on to the issues and complaints section. And just go down that list.
The first one is 21006, that's the request for no parking zone between Southwest Hosler Way and working down towards the YMCA entrance. No real update, we're still doing patrolling up there. Just basically warning the cars that are parked too close to those crosswalks in that intersection. We are working on a PSA. We put one out, but I don't believe it was for this month. So that should be coming out this month. beginning of next month.
Okay. Anybody have any thoughts on that before we move on? Okay. 2202.
Yeah, so we met with Public Works and they're down there, they've been going down there and they're looking at it, trying to figure out how to meet the state statute and keep as many parking spaces as possible. I haven't gotten any update from them, but again, we are going down there and enforcing that warnings. It's a little bit hard to cite anybody for parking in a parking space, even though it's a parking space, but it's basically in violation of statute right now. So we're just giving warnings if they're parked within that 20 feet. Again, social media. I believe we put something out on that one. The crosswalk, okay, so maybe we can do that. They're in the works. We're working with our social media person to get stuff out there. But right now it's just basically enforcement and education. And that's the same thing for 03.
Okay. Anybody have anything on those before we move on? Okay, we can move on to Meeting-5. Meeting-5.
Okay, so, I think everybody's got it in their packet if they have it.
I did not print. I know I didn't print either. If you have.
Oh, yes, I do.
It took me 20 minutes for that. This is a new person meeting again. And
Still
it's
not
taking
there.
some getting used to.
Yes.
Okay, so the report is broken up into two segments. The first one is for DD Road segment between Highway 99 and Elwood Road. And that's the first set of analysis numbers. The second set goes from ED Road up to Highway 99 along Elwood. Now, with ED Road, basically I'll start off with, we placed the traffic counters at locations where we could identify basic patterns of driver behavior. So if you were to look back at the first set of maps there, counter location, based on where, as an example, based on where we place the counters at Copper Terrace, a high rate of speed, I could tell that if there's a high rate of speed going through that traffic counter, the ability of somebody to make a turn onto Copper Terrace or coming off Copper Terrace is not going to happen because they're lower speed turns. Otherwise, somebody who's going down there through that counter at 45 to 50 miles an hour is not going to make a left-hand turn on Copper Terrace. That just isn't feasible at that type of setup. So based on these locations, we can tell how many cars, generally speaking, are turning locally. How much of that traffic is local traffic and where they're coming on and where the majority of the traffic flow is coming to. So with that being said, I think that, looking back at the report, I've broken down the analysis for each one of the locations. Now, I could go through and read each one of those things to you. I don't really want to do that. What I want to do is go back to the graph. The graph tells the story. And the graph basically shows the 4 locations are represented by individual colors. And the individual colors are broken into either a solid line segment or a dashed line segment. Solid line segment is westbound and the dashed line segment is eastbound at that counter location. So we can tell by the graphs just what are we looking at for traffic, either westbound or eastbound at each one of the counter locations. And generally the story is there's a lot of high speed movement. And the worst is at Trailblazer. And I can say that Trailblazer is sort of unique because it's at a valley in the roadway. So people coming down the roadway are starting to pick up speed as they hit the dip and go up the hill. And so what you're seeing here is, generally speaking, where the red is the Trailblazer intersection counter. They had some really high speeds there. However, uniformly throughout the entire thing, all the speeds were very high. I would say that, yes, we have a speed limit of 40 miles per hour, but given that you say, okay, between 0 miles over the speed limit and 10 miles over the speed limit, that takes up a lot of the traffic flow in there. But there is still a fairly large proportion of vehicles that are exceeding 50 miles an hour going down ED Road. And you can tell which traffic counters that is occurring at. It's almost ubiquitous, except for the yellow, which is Copper Terrace. That's because we have a school crossing there. And we're coming up to the end of the road. People are going to dive down and basically come to a stop at Elward, or they're going to turn off and go into the school. So we can see that. But if you look at that, I can also tell you that, let's say we were looking at a traffic speed of 20 miles per hour at that school zone, you can see that there is a jump in the yellow lines. That represents traffic actually slowing down for the school zone crossing during that time frame. So you can actually see how the school zone traffic counter actually picks up that there's more traffic count during that time frame that are slowing down to hit the 20 mile an hour speed zone through the school zone and then picking up. But there's a large portion that doesn't. And you can see that as well. So basically, if we go back to each one of these individual segments, I think the issue that I'm really looking at towards the end is, there's a certain percentage that is exceeding the 10 mile an hour grace speed that the police tend to give them. That if you're going, not more than 10 miles over the speed limit, they really aren't going to ticket you, generally speaking. But what is that percentage of vehicles that are above that, and how many of that? What does that represent as far as total traffic? How many cars? And each one of these, you can actually see how many of those cars out of the total basically are exceeding the speed limit at each section, more than 20. So if you're going 20 miles an hour, let's see here, ED Road at Copper Terrace, basically, you get none above 20 miles over the speed limit, the speed zone is 40 in that zone, so they'd have to be doing 60 and above to get that. There's none there. 10 miles above that, you got 18. Now, that was over a 7-day period. So at Copper Terrace, you take 18 divided by 7, and you've got maybe 1.5 vehicles per day that exceeds the speed limit in that zone. And you apply that the same way all the way down. So really, when I'm looking at it, I'm saying, okay, percentages and stuff like that, what I like is, I can tell you that like at Nursery Way, you've got 679 plus 15. 690 cars in a 7-day period that are exceeding 50 miles an hour. Now, question comes up is that too much? When you've got a total count of 37,000 cars, it's a low percentage, but it is a high count of cars. Divide that by 7, and you've got 100 cars a day, basically. That the way I look at it, you've got 100 cars per day that are exceeding 50 miles per hour at any point. So when you look through these things, Trailblazer, basically, Trailblazer was the real tell-all. You basically have 4,268 cars plus 189 that are at 50 miles per hour and above. So the question you have is, again, percentage out of 36,000 cars, you get nearly 5,000 cars going out of it. That's a lot. And that's how you read these charts. So at the end, I have comments, but no suggestions. I'm not making suggestions because that's what we need to work with the police department and everybody else on how we want to deal with this. Now, take this information and know that I have put in an application to the state for a speed reduction to 35 miles an hour on that roadway. And the traffic count data is probably going to support doing that because it's too high as it is. And the conditions. But without doing something, even if we reduce it, it just shifts that curve, the volume of the cars, more of them are going to violate than they are right now. So that's a discussion item. I'm not sure how to solve that one based on driver habit. Looking at the Elworth Road, again, I think going back to the graph tells a really good story in that, generally speaking, everybody seems to be doing, the majority of people seem to be doing the posted speed limit or less. And that was over a 10-day cycle. We had a slight problem with traffic tubes breaking on the other counter location, so we had to reestablish that. So we extended the time period so I could get some overlap. But generally speaking, Elworth Road is not a speed issue. It's more perceived speed issue because of the condition of the roadway. Undulations, very narrow corridors, stuff like that. So I would say that generally speaking, the same conclusion can be made here, that people are ignoring the school zone. If you look at the 20 mile per hour setting there, I should see a jump in the traffic count that basically shifts for that area, for that particular traffic count should shift the data. There should be a higher blip at that point, and then it comes back down and goes back up into the higher reaches, but it doesn't. So basically, where this traffic counter was set was where the school zone signage and light occurred on Elworth. I was getting no change absolutely none throughout the day. Particularly during, the commute hours when school's out, stuff like that, there's absolutely no change in traffic speeds. So, again, if we've got this set up such that those traffic lights are for the pedestrian crossing at the roundabout, and they should be doing 20 miles an hour through there, I should have speeds of 20 miles an hour in the school zone. And it's not shown. Predominantly. So that's one item. But the rest of it is basically, I don't see any, I don't see speeding, generally speaking, based on the 45 mile an hour speed zone setting for that area. And we're below that. If we were to go to a 35 mile an hour speed along that section in the state, I'm not sure what the state will do with that. It does shift a lot of the data to be in excess, and then we can say, okay, how are we going to deal with that? But right now, just know that under the current conditions, there's not a lot of speed going on between that segment. And I do not include all the other factors that go along with it, such as the road condition, how narrow it is, how hilly it is, stuff like that. This is just based on the data of volume and speed. So with that, I don't really have anything else. If anybody has any specific questions about any of the particular data that's showing up, I tried to keep it uniform as far as each one of the analysis of each one of the points. You'll see the same basic terminology, just different numbers. But I think Edie has pretty easily said that Edie has a speeding issue and Elwood does not.
What's the length of the school zone?
It's long. Where we set this was at the light, and that's about 600 feet to the actual roundabout where all the traffic dead crossings are. So it's a fairly long stretch, and I wanted that one in particular so I could actually see what's the traffic pattern going like. Is there a morning commute issue? Is there an afternoon bottleneck? And basically, I didn't see them.
It's a little surprising too, because I take sometimes my son to school in the morning, and a lot of times it does back up quite a long ways at pay.
15 minutes and
Yeah,
it's just a blip.
I guess it was
Throughout
not
the
enough
day,
of a
it
blip to
operates
actually show.
just like the way it should.
Yeah. I was thinking it might be enough that blip to show, a slower speed because there's so many cars going slow coming up there.
We took it full account and everything, but the blip was so small that it was not impacted. It's not a relevant data set segment that describes how that thing operates. And we're really trying to figure out, is there too much speed? And the fact is that it's not that it's too much speed, it's just that when that school zone, you can tell by the data, when the school zone lighting is activated, people are ignoring it. But overall, they're staying below the posted speed, except for the special condition.
Yeah, it's a difficult school zone to manage because there's so much property. It's such a large property, and there's only 3 beacons. So it's kind of out of sight really quickly. Plus the placement of the, I guess you call it the southbound one on outward, being past the signal and already well into the school property. But
Right.
that's also difficult because if you put it before the signal, which you can do, you still have the potential of having this strange conflict where people are confused with a school zone beacon right before a traffic signal, which can be, and that was the main reason they didn't put it there.
Correct.
So, I don't know.
I think that the signals were set up where they were because of the ped crossing at the roundabout. That's where the signals are placed. they're trying to provide that zone where traffic slows down for pets at the roundabout.
Right? Yeah. Makes sense.
Not at Hague. Hague is stop control.
Right.
They got a signal.
Yeah.
The students shouldn't be crossing if they don't have a crossing signal. People shouldn't be going through that signal if the pets have the right of way and are crossing at their line. It's just the way it's set up.
Right.
Any questions or anything?
So you are going to present this material to the state, or it has been?
They do their own.
Oh.
They have run their own numbers. They've got their own data tubes that they've set up already. They collected their data. They wouldn't look at my stuff necessarily, but I have shared my information with Washington County.
Was Washington County the one who actually had to make the request?
They had to agree with it, and they did.
Did or did not?
No, they did.
Where do they differ?
What do you mean, where do they differ?
I heard you say that their information doesn't coordinate with your
Well,
information.
I'm not sure if it does or doesn't. I have no clue what their information, how they collect it, what they're set up. I put out 4 collection points on Edie Road and 3 on Elwood. And from what I can tell, state put out 1 collection point on Edie down by Trailblazer. And I'm not sure about, I think they put up another collection point on Elwood just south of our one at Simon.
So how does all this information get coordinated and
Well,
made workable?
my information doesn't go to them. The state does its own thing, and it, like I said, it has a different analysis that it takes into account other things or includes things that I did not, such as road configuration. So they look at it more intently than I did. I just basically did it on volume and speed, not road condition. How narrow is it? What's the constraints there? Visual corridor, stuff like that. The state will go through that. And they'll make a determination based on what their parameters are, which are, I think, much more stringent than mine. Mine are pretty basic, pretty loose. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing it.
Definitely good info, though. I would say surprising how much traffic is on the word day, pushing 100,000 cars a week. Or is that 10 days?
No.
That's 10 days.
10 days.
Okay.
9,000 vehicles on 10 days.
Yeah.
It runs about 5,000 a week, which is about what you would expect. Or, yeah. That's
About
what
5,000 a day.
5,500 a day, which is what I would expect. 99,000 a week, about 100,000 in that 10-day period. So it's somewhere around 70,000, which is what I expect for that material. 36,000 for 80 road. And that seems to be pretty consistent all the way in.
I imagine ODOT will get similar information if they put down collection points at Trailblazer.
Well, I'm sure
Going down
it
hills
doesn't,
like that.
it doesn't change. The driving habits won't change. And the fact that when we put 1 down, I had 4 of them. They did it afterwards. Yeah, I don't think it's not going to show any difference. I just get to be able to correlate some of the data to know that, okay, there's a lot of people peeling off to go into the local subdivisions there.
So how do we utilize this information? We ask the captain to provide more police there, or how do we use this? I guess that's the question.
We've had discussions, so we've had the city manager, chief of police, you, me, was public works, right? their engineering should be the last thing that's done. That's the most costly thing, and you cannot engineer your way out of certain situations.
Straight road.
It's a road, it's a collector. The idea is it's supposed to move on. So how do you change people's driving habits? And I've made my opinions known. I think we have options. I think those options would be better coming from PD and city management than from the engineer.
I can tell you one thing, because I drive Sunset all the time, your mobile radar speed sign with blue and reds,
Yes,
that is very, very effective.
it's like terrifying
People-
every time I come
Yeah.
around and I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, people in front of me, every single time they see that, brakes come on.
Yeah.
Yep.
It doesn't matter how long it's out there, that blue and
Yeah,
red
it's
really,
scary.
yeah.
It's your attention.
So you put that out on E Road, guaranteed people slow down.
We've had it out there before, yes.
Yeah. But it's
The
only
question-
while it's there, and
But
it's
the
only
question
temporary.
is, if people understand that blue, red lights flashing, oh yeah, I don't get a ticket.
Yeah, after a while, you get complacent,
Yeah.
people get complacent, but still, it has an effect, at least for a
We've
time.
had discussions, I've been, like I said, I'm kind of blunt, I'm the blunt, force trauma of the system. I have an idea, I think it would work. It's not gonna be well received.
What is it, Bob?
Well, I think the first thing we do, again, my opinion, is we do public outreach. We try to get the public on board with modifying their driving behavior. Because really, this is driving behavior. It's not a question of there's some invisible force other than gravity that's making these cars go fast. They're in the sport. They're pushing tough. And I can tell you that I've seen enough of it and been out there enough to know that there's some people just see us out there and they see it as well, and they do it even more. We have that. So I believe that the first step is always going to be public education, public outreach, public conscience that speeding is not just an individual response. It is an individual responsibility to have impacts on a larger scale. Not just the individual, but if they hit somebody in a car wreck, pedestrian, that their personal habit, personal choice made that situation worse than it could. So that's the first thing I was going for. And I will stick with that to my dying breath, that I believe that the community is some of the best way of getting people to slow down, is to make the community say, no, stop doing this. You gotta hurt our kids.
That's just a sad thing, though. These figures that we have here are after the tragedy that happened.
They're after the tragedy.
And it hasn't changed.
Well, I don't know what it was before the tragedy. I'm just reporting on what we did afterwards, and I see that I've got speeds in excess of 60 miles an hour, approaching 70 miles an hour, and that one little stretch of road. I'm going, I don't see a need for that kind of speed. I really don't. I have no clue why anybody would want to go that fast down through there, other than they are making a decision to have a good time. So the second step is always going to be, well, what do we do as a community? What do we want to do after that? And I think there are some things that don't require engineering to rebuild the road and do all sorts of stuff. And that's where the police come in.
Yeah, and we've done several over the years, extra patrols in that area. And we continue to do it. Again, with the social media outreach, we're working on that. And then one of our trailers are down, we got two of them. we are gonna put the trailer out there too, once we're done over on Sunset and Temple, so.
Yeah, an old Crown Vic, park an old Crown Vic somewhere, everybody's like, "Whew." Immediately think,
Well, I think that we have options that are available to us that we can employ. The traffic radar, things that we can put up on posts that tell you how fast you're going. You don't have to have the trailer out there, you can have these going, and hopefully the people start seeing the numbers, start getting your mind, something like that. That's doable, it's a cheaper way of doing it. But again, people after a while get immune to it as they see it. I have one thing that I suggested, that you look at what, Beaverton. And they've got a photo radar data.
yes, it would.
And they've actually got 2 or 3. And you take that and park it, you don't need a person in it. And people, you drive through there, you speed, you get a ticket. Costs us how much to buy a van and get all this stuff, but, you know, personal responsibility, you need a ticket, you drive the speed.
How much
And-
does it cost a van to get all the stuff?
No idea.
Probably nothing compared to the revenue.
Yeah, right.
We're talking about like,
Um,
I didn't really see it on 99.
And the thing is that with the van, which is why Beaverton does it, they can move the van all over the place. And it's never the same position, never, and it just keeps people honest.
I think they're only required to put one sign up like 400 feet in front of it, so they can do a photo radar.
Photo radar van in progress, and it just cranks it out. I'm not sure the public would like that, but I think that the Highway 99 red flex system, and the complaints I get on that are a pretty good indicator that people don't like them, but if they don't like them, then do something about it.
People don't want to fall down on their bad behavior.
Yeah.
I've been here years and I've never got one red light ticket on 99. There's no reason for it.
I lived in Sherwood for 16 years and I did not get it. Never had any problems. And then I've lived in Canoe for the past 8. I drive all the way through all the back roads, front roads, and everything like that. I still don't get tickets just because it's not worth it. Not worth the time, not worth the money, not worth the danger that goes with it. If I'm going to be late, I'm going to be late, so I'm going to take them out, so I'm being late. Plan to leave a little bit earlier. But that's not my call. That comes from active discussion at a much higher level. But there are options there. The engineering side of stuff, they're pretty limited what we can do.
That stretch of E is what that letter is for, funding from the county to do a road improvement. So that's further down the road, but there are environmental factors that can be put into design. That when it eventually gets built, you know, that can be part of the long term. They'll never get everybody, but I think that's a really good long term. I think I agree with you that I think education and changing people's behavior is number one. I think that public education in the sense of what probably we're most familiar with, which is putting signs out that say my kids live here, drive slow, and doing Facebook posts. Don't think that will ever change people's behavior to the point that you get those speeds down where they need to be. I think the only public education that will change people's behavior is public education that provides some sort of a negative consequence for their behavior, which is the enforcement side of things, whether that's, more active enforcement from our officers or through some sort of a more passive system like you're talking about. But I think the only way that you change people's behavior on a road is if they know that when I drive that road, I can't drive that road or I'm going to get consequence. As long as they know that they can drive that road at whatever speed they want without consequence, they're not going to change it just because somebody posts something on social media. It just doesn't think that changes people's behavior. And so we talk, part of like our mission or what we're supposed to do is public outreach or public education. While you were talking, I was just trying to think of like, what does that look like? That actually is effective. And I was struggling to come up with something that didn't involve tickets. Because I just don't think that people, I don't know, we live in a day and age where they get information overload or everybody's just so focused on what they're doing and not focused on the people and environment around them that unless you make it personal for them, nothing changes.
I do think that if it goes through and the speed limit is lowered, you're still gonna have speeders, but that entirety of that graph will shift down just a little bit, because people typically do look at that and go, oh, I can go this much over, and to an extent they do follow it somewhat, and that's pretty well shown in the graphs. So if it does get lowered from 40 to 35, then maybe that entire aggregate will shift by 5 miles an hour overall. So the overall effect would be slower speeds, but you'd still have the speeders that just maybe would be doing 60, 70 miles an hour. There's always going to be those idiot outliers that do that kind of thing. But in general, the people that are going like 10 over will be doing 45 instead of 50.
I think the way I look at it, the real issue is with going back to the graph, because the graph tells me a lot, is the people doing 20 plus miles an hour over the speed limit. Reducing that 35, I don't think it's going to change that at all.
Because those are the
Ones that are habitual, that they're going to drive as fast as they can. They're really not cognizant of speed relative to propriety of the driving environment.
those are the people for this.
They have their own reasons why, but the idea is that driving is a conscious effort. You can't go like, that's what kills me.
Okay, like the guy's name from PS, University.
Yes.
It's just a T.
Your teeth?
I should have looked at it before I said it.
He's made a couple of presentations.
Yeah. So the professor from University who preaches this stuff around and teaches in case of that. Yes.
Yeah.
He is really big on the visibility of enforcement. So like the difference between an unmarked police car hiding behind a bush trying to catch speeders versus a marked police car parked out on the street where everyone can see it. And he's big on put the marked car out there where everyone can see it so they see it. It's visible. It's that reminder every time you drive through, you see that car. There's enforcement around here. I'm going to get caught one of these days if I'm not paying attention. And how much more educational that is to people than a car that's hiding. And I think that presence is important. I don't know how you do that with limited resources that we have. I don't know. Gaston, they do park it. Gaston, they park it. Old
Yeah, they have.
police car. It's nobody's ever in it, but you see it, you're like, oh.
Yeah.
Makes
That's why I
me think.
suggested it, because it does, it really does, every time you go somewhere, it'll make you think, but, you end up with that complacency after a while, I think, but another thing that I've seen that does actually work is going on Farmington in Portland. They have on wood poles, the speed cameras. And there's all kinds of signs and whatnot for it, but there's permanent speed cameras on wood poles in both directions. Everyone goes slow through that area. It doesn't matter where you are, when you're up high on Farmington heading down the hill, it's 40 miles an hour, but it's 35.
Yeah,
And they don't
because they know
like
it's
that.
there.
Oh, yeah.
So that's like, if the city ever did go the route of doing like a ban or something, I would hope that you would just sign crap as much as you can. Make it as obvious as it can be, so no one is like, oh, I got hit by that that van, I didn't know it was there. Totally just trying to make money off of us. If you make it obvious, like there's, the whole point is we're trying to get people to slow down, not give tickets. And so if you get people to slow down by making it super aware, like, hey, you can't speed here, or there will be a consequence. Like that's gonna go so much farther. Than,
Agreed.
just doing the bare minimum and the people kind of don't. I don't know, that, I feel like our job is public education, but I'm just trying to think of how do we do that that's actually effective? I feel like there just has to be this at least potential consequence.
Yeah, I guess it is, what you're saying is that you're not gonna catch all the speeders, but you can educate everyone, just like having signs up.
No, I mean, we touched on everything. It comes down to officers and how many we have and what we can get out there. There's so many different positions. There's spots in the city that people want us, so that's the other issue. Most of the time, there's just two of us out there. That's the reality of it right now. To spend time on ED, they spend time on Sunset, all the other places, and then take the call. I mean, it's just a hard reality that we just don't have the bodies right now to spend the time that we actually need to spend on these streets to enforce the speeds.
Can I switch gears real quick about like Edie Road, say? Places like Trailblazer or where you see these really high speeds, what if you focus on pedestrians a little bit too? I've seen it in places where they've actually closed sidewalk crossings. So people in the neighborhood have to stay on that side of the street and keep people out of the street. They're less likely to get hit crossing the street. So if there's certain places where you close the crosswalk, you put just the round thing that says crosswalk closed, and you force people to go farther up to cross in a little bit more visible, safer place. I don't know how that would necessarily pertain to E Road because it is a pretty big open road, but say at Trailblazer where everyone seems to be going much faster because of the, gravity pulling people down and they just hit the gas. Maybe something to think about. I know you say you can't engineer your way out of it.
Well, there are certain things, I think what Julia was recommending was very good, trying to get the funds. I would look at E Road and I would say if I were to do anything with that, maybe give it the same type of configuration that Sunset has, which is the central island,
Right.
which is, it narrows the lanes. It forces people to feel a little less comfortable with doing high speed. It's a straight line.
It also
But-
forces people to cross in certain.
But it forces people to cross only in certain areas and it forces cars to, they basically can't cross the center line without creating their own problem for themselves. So, there's some benefits to it. That is expensive. That is a very expensive upgrade. Sunset, even with Sunset, I think that if you guys remember, I gave you traffic counts with Sunset. And they showed a similar type of speeding issue there, even with the narrower lanes on a corner with a pet crossing. And we still have problems with
cars blowing through that crossing, school crossing guards and children were there trying to get across. They just didn't want. There's, like I said, there's limitations to what I can do. And still keep the intent of the roadway, which is trying to get a certain volume of traffic through that point A to point B. I'm not worried about the speed of the, if it's a lower speed, absolutely wonderful. I just want to make sure that the volume keeps going through there. So if I can do that, great. There's no reason for it to speed. We're in town. And that means to me, most of this is problems. Not, if you were to look at Elward, you say, okay, why is Elward is, by the data, is not speeding. Elward is the major commuter route coming from Hillsborough, going Newburgh. Show me how that's wrong. The commuter traffic is not speeding. If it was commuter traffic, I would see a very high proportionate number of speeding traffic speeds along the Elward. I don't see that. That's the commuter road. That's the main commuter road. Eady Road is mostly local people. Yes, there are some commuters that use it, but the majority of the traffic there is local. So what's the speed issue then? That's local behavior. How do we deal with it?
Good discussion, I guess. I was curious if you have done enforcement of the school zone by the high school.
Oh, yeah.
Is it, you're finding the same thing, that people are ignoring it?
Well, when we're there, it seems like we're not writing a lot of tickets. Because we're there, they see us. Just when they don't see us is. And in the mornings, that's our mornings and afternoons when school starts and ends. That's our main focus is school zones. So we are all in the school zones in the morning and afternoon. But again, we can't be everywhere, so when you see that black and white, it's pretty obvious. I don't think we write a lot of tickets over there.
So I understand that there's like, you don't have enough resources, but I think that's kind of along the lines of what I was saying earlier, what Moji says about being visible. I want to say that there's a frequency in which you have to be present. It's frequent, and there's a certain frequency, but it's also random. And so you don't know, they might be there, they might not be there, but there's always that thought, like, they're usually there, so I'm gonna slow down. But I know you don't have the resources to do that, but ideally that's where we need to go, I think, is, I was thinking about, I used to drive to Newburgh for work every day, coming home from Newburgh, between Newburgh and here, you get that, like, my kids always call it the tree top. That tree canopy, there's a few spots that cops always hang out. And you just never know if they're gonna be there, but they're there frequent enough that, like, I don't know, you slow down. For those of you who get hit with it, and it's that frequent enough, but not on a consistent schedule that makes you change your behavior.
Dr. Takalu, I remember him saying that if you see an officer, drive by, that you'll think of that for about like 3 months, you'll think, every time you go by there, you'll slow down. But then after that,
It fades.
it fades, and you're like, okay, but yeah, 3 months was a time period, so
Is it out of place to ask if there's a possibility of bringing like Washington County Sheriff in to assist with that, or is that even legal?
No, we've done that. We've done coordinated patrols with them before. The traffic unit.
that they're doing all over the place.
We're getting a bunch of calls, not the school zone, but up Edie Road in the county. And they just don't have the manpower to go up there, so they're asking us, and say, well, we don't have the manpower either. So.
Yeah, they're spread out. I know, because they drive the county all the time, so they're spread out a lot.
Yeah, and we've done one with them down here already this year.
Cool.
Okay,
So what was over for ideas, but bang my head against it.
I do think it'll help if they do lower the speed limit, that will at least lower the overall aggregate count.
I think
By 5 miles
that if
an
they
hour.
lower the speed limit, that what I would recommend that, we'll do is go out and basically check, set out the traffic tunes again after it's been there for a while and see how it's changed or not changed. Based on our data, that will give us a better understanding of what do we do if we've done this, we've lowered the speed limit. Is it made any difference at all? Now, if it does, great. If it doesn't, so I think that a lot of this is patience and data driven, with a lot of ideas on how to do it, but you're balancing the ability based on scarcity of a resource versus the cost to get that resource for others. And that's a balancing act that has to do a lot of input from elected officials and people, and so.
Something that I've thought about for a long while. I can't remember the last time I had to renew my license to actually go in there, take the written test and pass it. I think probably should have more frequent renewals where you really have to take the test. And that's, something to reinforce, the laws. Hey, again, if I'm going to break the law, I've made a conscious decision to break the law. So nothing that we can do anything about, but just
all right. Any other thoughts on this one? It's not on the agenda, but do we need to approve that?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that would be good. You guys would review that letter. Does everybody have a copy? I got plenty.
I think the last time we met, we talked about the idea that the county is well aware this was a fatality, this accident that we're referring to here, right?
Oh, yes.
So we don't need to put the word fatal accident in here?
I thought that might be good. When I read it, I mean, I'm okay with that one, but there's a good spot to put that in there.
Right there, a fatal traffic accident, right there in that second paragraph, third line down. And I'm a little confused about what she meant by when she used the word appreciate. In that same paragraph, she said, do not appreciate that the road is not in our jurisdiction. Does she mean they don't care that it's not in the jurisdiction? They don't understand that it's not in the jurisdiction? Do we know what definition she was attributing to it?
I think it's the latter of what you said. It's basically people don't understand that there are roads within the city limits that are not under the city's purview. So you could say, let's change that from appreciate and convert it to understand. I think the tone, she's trying to be a little less, provide a better tone.
Maybe they don't find it relevant that it's not in our jurisdiction?
If people don't take the time to figure it out, who's gonna tell them?
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't know.
A lot of them don't know. A lot of them probably don't care. They just want something done. I think she's using it as a term that she has used in certain political areas, because it does have a different connotation, a different tone, and presented that way.
So what do we want to use?
Do not know.
Say do not fully appreciate how context, how little extra to it.
Yeah, I like that.
I think if you're saying appreciate versus fully appreciate, fully is just another descriptor of appreciate. I'm technical, so I would say if you have a problem with appreciate, change the word appreciate to something that means more contextually with what you wanted to say, that people don't understand, that it's somehow.
I guess, I'm either okay with it the way it's written, or I would probably change it completely in that this is, the most recent volume of concerns raised came after the fatal traffic accident involving 2 young girls, and that the citizens are looking for the city and the county to work together to make improvements for safety. I would, it's kind of, I guess I read it like, I don't really care whose road it is. I want it fixed. And, or I don't understand that it's not in the city's jurisdiction, so I don't understand why the city can't do anything. Like, all those are just contextual, but really what it comes down to is people are saying, work, like, here, you city, Sherwood, work with the county and get this road fixed. And here's this avenue to get funding projects. So if it was worded in that, like, the citizens of Sherwood are looking to the county to partner with the city to make improvements, to make safety improvements to this road or something. Someone can find it.
So basically, this
hear, what I heard was, the citizens want the city to coordinate with Washington, to get them, to make safety improvements to the road.
Yeah, that's what I was.
Take out anything that says it's the city's jurisdiction, county's jurisdiction, doesn't matter. Just get the road to be a more safe.
Citizens raising concerns, especially in the face of of a tragedy, are asking that the city and the county work together to improve the road for safety.
If you can just send that to me. Julia will do it.
I was gonna say, I can make with that,
Good.
send it back to you.
And I got one too.
Okay.
It's been a traffic accident, a traffic crash.
So,
Came after a traffic crash.
Yes, involving two. It's a crash or accident.
Why are we beating around the bush? Traffic deaths.
What's the terminology? What's the difference in the terminology?
After a traffic
Or
fatality.
fatal traffic crash.
the movie says not for accidents.
Yeah,
Okay,
an accident.
is a
Crash.
unintentional.
Yeah.
Just happened.
Accident.
Or do you wanna review that, or do you want to just share it with me later, what you're reading?
Citizens raising concerns, especially in the face of a tragedy, are asking that the city and the county work together to improve the safety of the road.
If this project gets funded, it would be a county project. And then it would remain
Well,
a county road.
There's a couple of things. I mean, this tip funding is the main thing. We get this tip funding, it could be a county this tip funded project that the city could do. We're really doing that with a couple of projects that are basically clean water services projects that I'm doing. I've switched on. Depends on horsepower, being able to provide that service and get it done. So it's not necessarily one or the other. It could be the city does it by managing the contract, or the county does it by managing the contract. County can do it in-house.
Would remain, you think it would remain a county road?
If we're gonna upgrade it, I think we're gonna, speaking for Craig here, Sheldon, who, if the road has been upgraded, then we wanna take it into the city, bring it into the city. So we would probably look at having a transfer, because the county doesn't necessarily want the road to be responsible for the road maintenance over years and years and years. So if they upgraded the road and the city's agreeing to all the design and requirements, it meets all of that, I would suggest that we do take it. It makes it a lot easier.
Can you city control the design project?
It would be done to the city standards to a large part of it. But the idea of long-term maintenance, the city doesn't necessarily want to take in a county road that is
not meeting city standards or rural configuration, or if they do bring it up to city standards, which they have been, working with us on. So a lot of the developments out there, if you look at the roadways, we've gotten them to do it to city standards. So the county's not used to that. I just think that based on the road configuration and some of the current condition, that the city would be willing to accept it until it's brought up to the standard.
Any other suggestions, modifications?
So I can make those edits and then send it out to everybody just for your thumbs up and then forward it on to you for your signature. Bob, that sounds good.
Yeah, that's fine.
Take
Take it, run with it.
You need to approve it.
Everything's-
We'll take someone new motion to approve it as amended. Change accident to crash, traffic crash.
Fatal traffic crash. I move to approve the letter as amended.
Second.
Okay. Last minute discussion. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. The committee comments. Non-agenda.
Just next month, it sounds like we're gonna have the public works director stopping by. For the first part of the meeting, just to answer any questions you all have on curb paintings or anything, signage, flashing stop signs, anything like that. He'll be here first part of our June meeting. So if you have any questions, write them down.
Yes.
Any question? Do we know where Julie's going? What's going on with Julie?
She is, Julia is.
Yeah.
Julia.
Yeah.
She is becoming the city manager down the state. So she is taking on new responsibility, higher level, progressing her career. Major step,
Here for 17 years.
17 years. Doing more than I want to do.
So I have a question. Captain, any word on the report from the county or state from the crash, the deaths of two girls on Edie Road?
I think it's wrapping up. So there should be something out. I'm just speculating. In a month or two. The parents have all been advised of the results. It wasn't released yet.
And I wouldn't expect the 35 mile/hour speed zone change to processing of this week.
Okay. I'm assuming we don't have any citizens comment.
Tonight. I did reach out, just so you know, to the Cedar Brook HOA regarding some clarification on the request they put in for that roundabout crosswalk area, and they just didn't have anybody available to attend or provide clarification, so maybe next week or month. They did reach out to them, so.
Okay, well, that's the end of the agenda, so that will adjourn. Okay.